If you work at Starbucks, if you're one of the 135,000 people who work at Starbucks in the US, you can now do a bachelor's degree through ASU's online degree program. If you're a junior or a senior, you get full tuition coverage all the way to graduation. If you're a freshman or a sophomore, there's an on-ramp with a substantial tuition reduction and some college financial aid in there as well. And you can do any degree, so you can do any of the 40 degrees that ASU offers, so electrical engineering, psychology, business, and there's no obligation to stay at Starbucks when you finish. So like ASU, as they see their students, we kind of want them to go on to great things, whether it's with Starbucks or not. Starbucks as a business is unusual in that we're one of the very few global businesses that actually still makes money putting human beings face to face. Most companies do that with, trying to get you to look at a screen or to sit behind the windshield of their cars. But we actually, that's our business. And what that means is we've got to be able, for our customers, the face of Starbucks is not Howard Schultz, it's the barista who makes your latte in your local store. And so our business depends on being able to hire these really bright, emotionally engaged people who can create a connection. That is fundamental to our business. And for our customers, we can do all kinds of corporate social responsibility activities, and we do, but the one that they actually care about the most is, are you taking care of the people who are taking care of us? So anything we do in that dimension is actually a really good business investment from our perspective. And as you saw from just the stories of some of the young people who work at Starbucks today, we employ a generation that has been hit really hard by a recession, and as we talked to them, it was really apparent that the biggest thing that we could focus on as we were trying to do something new was around education. So back in 1987, Starbucks was one of the first companies, I think, to offer healthcare to part-time workers, which at the time was considered very radical and very risky, and why would you do that? And of course, many, many, many companies have followed suit ever since then. About a year ago, we were sitting down and saying, what's the equivalent now? What's the equivalent kind of big move for this generation that will continue to allow us to attract and keep these really bright, emotionally engaged, fantastic people that our business absolutely depends on? And we also thought or hoped that online education had kind of reached a point, finally, where it was good enough to be a fantastic option for young working adults, which is basically what Starbucks employs in about 50 states. So we went out and we looked for a partner. And I went out and I talked to many universities, did a lot of research and talked to many, many universities, and was actually surprised to figure out how few were really kind of ready for prime time in online education. The sector is still very dominated by the famous for-profits who have large marketing budgets to attract students, and that's not really what we were looking to do. But when we talked to the state universities, to the state colleges, to the public colleges, to the not-for-profit colleges, many of them told us that they really, really wanted to be into it, but they weren't. They only had a couple of degree programs ready, or they were kind of still getting their feet under them. So we came up with a short list, which was a very good short list, but it was a very short list, and it was really apparent when we started talking to ASU that they were so different to everyone else. Everyone that we talked to at ASU was super clear on what ASU was trying to do in the world, and it was a really big idea. They weren't talking about the endowments and the football team and the faculty's research interests and all that kind of stuff. They were talking about what ASU wanted to do in the world. And what we took away from what they, in our early meetings when they would just all describe this so consistently was they wanted nothing less than to transform higher education so that your parents' zip code was no longer the biggest determinant of whether or not you got a college degree, which it is today. And they also wanted to do this at a scale that gave America some chance of meeting these incredibly ambitious higher education goals. We're supposed to have 8 million more college graduates by 2020. I mean, that's just humongous. And ASU was this college that was talking about, all right, if that's what the country's supposed to do, how are we going to take on our part of that, and how are we going to drive for that? So they were trying to do this at a big scale. And they were also trying to do it with an insistence that was absolutely no reason to compromise quality, in fact, the reverse. And they were also at the same time saying, we also want to change what we're teaching itself so that it's actually designed and aligned around the challenges that this generation is going to have to solve for the world instead of the faculty's research interests, which is how universities are traditionally organized. So they had their Department of Space Exploration or their Center for Sustainability, and we're designing courses around those things. And we were just blown away. We just thought, this is amazing. Who knew that this was how they think? And so we started to go like, these people are innovators who can run rings around us in the business world. And we really wanted to work with them. So on our very first visit, they took us to, so that's really why we picked ASU. On our very first visit, they took us to the Mars spaceflight facility, and they showed us a full-scale model of one of the rover, and we learned that those amazing, miraculous photos that we now get to see of the surface of Mars is because there are scientists at ASU controlling those cameras and interpreting those images for the world. So we figured, all right, this is an organization that is not scared of venturing into the unknown and can handle a little bit of complexity and can handle a little bit of scale. And we share the same values. So it was a no-brainer to choose ASU, and kind of in tribute to how impressed we were, we gave the project the internal project name, Project Rover, for the spirit and the opportunity and the curiosity that they were bringing to this work. We quickly learned actually that one of ASU's real superpowers was around partnership itself. They were just really good at setting up partnerships, making partnerships work, getting stuff done through partners, and that's actually much harder than it seems. They actually taught us a lot about how to make partnerships effective and how to come together and do that kind of stuff. They were prepared, given their ambitions for what they wanted to do in higher education, they were absolutely prepared to work with any kind of organization that wanted to transform access to high quality education. And so they knew how to work with everyone from the community college system, the high schools, tiny educational technology startups, giant education companies, Silicon Valley, companies like Starbucks. They just knew how to kind of get down and roll up their sleeves with people who were coming from very, very different sectors and backgrounds and approaches and scales and all that kind of stuff. They knew how to work on a very human, face-to-face way with any kind of organization, and they already had a lot of those partnerships in place. So they knew how to prototype really fast. They knew how to learn lessons and kind of apply them and actually expose them so that others could follow them. That meant, we discovered, and here's a great lesson for any kind of organization that's trying to drive transformation, they were getting this reputation for being the place to go if you wanted to figure out if your great idea actually worked in the real world with real students and real faculty. So they were getting a first look at all of the best ideas and innovations that were out there. So they were just getting better and better the more they were prototyping and researching. And they had a leader in President Michael Crow who was absolutely adamant about pushing for scale and quality at the same time. And what we recognized from Starbucks is ASU is that kind of organization that, and I think of them as the best kinds of organizations that actually get better by scaling. They actually are forced to get better in order to achieve the kind of ambitions that they want to achieve. Sometimes we think about it at Starbucks as like, it would be great to do the perfect little local indie coffee shop with the perfect croissant. But a really interesting challenge is how do you get to be good enough to be, in 17,000 stores in 60 countries? And that's the kind of thinking that ASU had as well. It was just that fearlessness around scale and quality not being mutually exclusive. I mean, who knew that ASU is now the biggest producer of Fulbright scholars in the country? And that to me just said a lot about their uncompromising attitude there. So that's why we picked Arizona. But long before we actually signed any kind of contracts or anything like that, we just decided we're just going to sit down and figure out how to make this work. And not just how to make it work, but to say, what are the other things that we can do because we are the organizations that are working together? Can we make the people going into this program more successful than regular graduates because they have a supportive employer, they have that kind of wraparound kind of family style love making them happy or sorry, making them more successful as they're studying. So what are the kinds of other things that we can bring because we're doing this together to make these students more successful? So we just sat down long before we had a contract and started talking about these kinds of things. And there was so much we just didn't know. We had no idea how much this is going to cost either side. We had no idea if no people would sign up, if 50,000 people would sign up. We didn't know what this kind of corporate partnership would do for ASU's reputation, good or bad. We didn't know if Starbucks investors would struggle with this, because certainly there have been times in the past, in the depths of the recession, where institutional investors have asked us to drop, for example, healthcare. And here we were saying, could we roll out a multi-million dollar program like this? But the important thing was what we did know. And what we did know was Starbucks had employees who would just make fantastic students, and we were willing to invest in them to supplement whatever they would get in their regular kind of student aid world. We wanted to do that. And ASU had this incredible program, online program built on top of a remarkable university. And Starbucks could give ASU a national platform to tell this story that we were discovering for ourselves. And we both felt we were doing it for the right reasons, which was essentially to make life a little bit fairer for a group of people who were just bursting with potential. And so we just said, all right, we're going to do it, and we worked. Over that winter, we came down to Arizona quite a bit, and let me tell you, we were very happy to do so from Seattle. We were very selfless about our Alaska Air Miles coming down here in January. But as we did so, and as we got to spend more time down here, we became convinced that no small part of ASU's daring was actually because they were here in Arizona, and the sandbox for innovation that you have in a place like Arizona lets you do things that you can't do in other places in the country. And we recognized a little bit of that, because I think Seattle had a little bit of that, particularly kind of in the 90s, the 80s and 90s, that kind of frontier mentality where you're able to take bigger risks and do more daring things and do them on a scale that's actually bigger, because you're away from the spotlight, and it's incredibly freeing. And so we started to recognize that you can really do these amazing things because you're in this place that is still forming and growing, and the Jell-O mold is not set. And we looked at that and kind of saw that President Crow was able to put in place this vision that seemed to us far more radical and literally 10 times larger actually in scale than he might have been able to do had he stayed in the East Coast Ivy League. There's just a lot you can do while the rest of the world is looking at New York or Silicon Valley or Harvard for innovation. There's a lot you can do when you're working in a place that supports that kind of risk-taking, and frankly where the demographics look a lot more like the future of this country than the past, and where you're able to start tackling challenges that the rest of the country is about to have to start tackling, but you have a bit of a head start on doing so, whether it is that kind of sustainability or exploration of new territories or whatever. You have this kind of freedom to really invent new territories when you have that that spirit of the place. President Crow sometimes talks a little bit about Berkeley, and I've always been fascinated when he does so, because he'll talk about Berkeley in the 1950s. There were 6 million people, I think, in California in the 1950s. And Berkeley took in anyone from the high school system with a B average and created one of the world's great research universities at a time when everyone was still looking to the East Coast Ivy League. And I think it's just such an extraordinary model for him to just turn around and say, that was a model that was built on inclusion, not exclusion. And we need to do it again because we've lost our way in that, and it's happening here in Arizona. So I had the privilege of talking to his predecessor last night, Lati, which was very inspiring. And he asked me, why did I move to America? I don't know if you've noticed yet, but I'm not from here. And having heard even more about Arizona on this trip, because I'm getting to meet this group of people, what I wanted to say was, I fell in love with a country where a question like, what does Arizona want, was not rhetorical. You actually asked. And you have this spirit of saying, all right, now we know, and how are we going to organize ourselves to create this and do this? And, as an Irish immigrant, that was absolutely the spirit that I fell in love with of America. And it's right here. It's absolutely right here. And one of the great privileges of getting to work on a program like this and finding ASU and creating this partnership and creating this program was then, because Starbucks has a megaphone, was being able to then kind of let more people see what was going on. So I wanted to just close with a little excerpt from the New York Times on the day that we launched this. So Joan O'Sara was going to write about a piece about, we got a lot of press for this program, and Joan O'Sara was going to write a piece about the partnership and Starbucks, and we're known for, Starbucks is famous for being Starbucks and all that kind of stuff. But what Joan O'Sara decided to do, and I cannot tell you how thrilled we were that this was his path, was he wrote an entire op-ed on that day about ASU going like, yeah, Starbucks, but like, do you guys know about what's going on over in Arizona? And he literally started, was like, I hadn't realized the extent of what's going on, to which Starbucks, to which Arizona State matches Starbucks in trailblazing. Actually far outclasses it, to be quite honest. It is attempting nothing less than the reinvention of the university. If this model succeeds, it offers some real hope that higher education can become, as it once was, a place that views its mission as educating everybody, not just the world's elite. You should be so proud of what's happening here.